Tuesday edition of lcpioneers.com live, presented by PioStream, as we're with you 4 days a week, Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time, live on Facebook. You can find us by typing in lcpioneers.com/live, and all of our shows archived to watch on demand, available to see on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/lcpios, keeping you connected with student athletes, coaches, members of the Lewis and Clark College community at large, and our alumni. And this week is going to be a lot of fun because it is Hall of Fame week on lcpioneers.com live. Hello, I am Ryan Goff. I am the play-by-play voice and director of athletic communications for Lewis and Clark. We are the Pioneers out of Portland, Oregon, and as I mentioned, a chance to celebrate the class of 2020 into the Lewis and Clark Athletics Hall of Fame, one of the oldest Hall of Fames in the entire Pacific Northwest for collegiate athletics, and we are excited as soon as we possibly can, certainly with everything continuing with the coronavirus pandemic, to welcome in our class of 2020 with an in-person induction, still targeting sometime in spring to do that with everyone that we can on campus in Portland, Oregon. We're going to have 4 inductees individually, the 1993-94 men's basketball team, and 2 others inducted for meritorious service and lifetime achievement. So our first guest today in a few minutes will be Jeff Miller, who's a class of 1993 graduate from football and track and field, holds significant milestones in both of those sports that we'll talk about, and get a chance to hear what induction into the Athletics Hall of Fame individually means for him, as he is also already a member of some of our teams in the Athletics Hall of Fame. You can find out more about Lewis and Clark Athletics Hall of Fame by going to lcpioneershof.com or go to lcpioneers.com and click on the Hall of Fame link. So I'll have Jeff here in just a few moments. Invite you to ask your questions. You can comment in the Facebook Live comments below, or anytime. Email us sports@lclark.edu. We will give you our guest list for the rest of the week at the end of the show too. So if you have any guests for any of our future Hall of Famers that'll be on the show, be sure to do that. If you have any questions, I should say, for any of our future guests. I invite you to visit us also on Twitter and Instagram. You can find us on both platforms, LC Pioneers on both. Connect with us there. And then, as I mentioned, we continue to update our YouTube playlist with all of our shows dating back to the last day of March. You can see those on our YouTube channel. Thanks for everyone who's subscribed to get updates on our YouTube platform, as Jim Proctor was our guest last Friday to talk about the Environmental Studies Symposium and how student athletes get involved with the symposia at Lewis and Clark. Our Pioneers of the Week continue to be updated as well. If you haven't already, you can subscribe to Pioneers Weekly. It's a Tuesday newsletter where we also share out our featured Pioneers of the Week. If you don't know how to do that, be sure to email us sports@lclark.edu to get information. And a really neat thing that happened, about 3 or 4 weeks ago at this point, student athletes Matthew Brown and Ramez Adia were winners of the Invent Oregon Collegiate Competition. $10,000 awarded to them to continue to work on their invention, Safe Smart Start, which is pretty exciting. You can read that article on our webpage, lcpioneers.com. And also, Homecoming at Home continues throughout the month of October. And like I said, this is a big week for athletics with Homecoming at Home, not only with lcpioneers.com live in this show and having our Hall of Fame inductees for the class of 2020 joining us, but also tonight, tomorrow, and Thursday, we're going to have a chance for coaches and student athletes to connect with you from our alumni community. If you go to Homecoming at Home, the easiest way is go.lclark.edu/homecoming. You can see our schedule. The first event tonight at 5:30. We have 4 of our athletics programs meeting with their coaches and student athletes starting at 5:30 tonight Pacific time. Be sure to go to go.lclark.edu/homecoming for more information. And with that, let's bring in our guest for today, one of the class of 2020 individual inductees to the Lewis and Clark Athletics Hall of Fame. We're excited to bring in Jeff Miller to lcpioneers.com live. Jeff, appreciate taking the time to join us on this Tuesday and kind of kickstart Hall of Fame week on the show. It's pretty exciting to have all of our members of the Lewis and Clark Hall of Fame, other than one, join us over the course of the next 4 days, and you're our first. A member of football and track and field. And before we get to the specifics of the sport, kind of give me your origin story. What originally brought you to Lewis and Clark to compete?
Well, thank you, Ryan. And first of all, thanks for having me on the show. I'm happy to kick things off. I'm excited also to watch some of the Hall of Fame interviews this week, so it'll be definitely fun. My journey, yeah. So I guess I'll just start by, I grew up in a small town in Eastern Oregon most of my life, and then when I became a freshman in high school, my parents decided to move to Portland, And at that time, my parents thought did a lot of research and found that this high school called Barlow out in Gresham was a great place to go. And so we moved to East Gresham. Um, I didn't really know. I was kind of a late bloomer, and I was a little small. I was always pretty fast, but definitely, made my way through the high school system. And being a late bloomer, I didn't really get a lot of looks at a lot of colleges initially. Like I know, if you don't start or play a lot as a junior in varsity, you're probably not going to be on the radar of a lot of the colleges out there. But I did have a really good senior season, and track was also a huge part of that. It was, like I said, I was always pretty fast, and I was able to get recognized that way. Um, but I didn't know about Lewis and Clark. I didn't know if I was going to go to Lewis and Clark. I was recruited by a lot of the smaller schools in the region out throughout Oregon and Washington and Idaho and a little bit in Montana, and a little bit in California. But I was excited because it was definitely an up and coming program at Lewis and Clark, with Coach Tom Smythe being there, and I played wide receiver, obviously, and in the high school that I went to, we didn't really throw much at the time. I was really lucky if I could catch maybe one or two balls a game. I did score touchdowns, so that maybe got me recognized a little bit. But going to Lewis and Clark, and knowing that it was predominantly a pass-oriented program, I was incredibly excited about that.
Well,
So, yeah.
I was going to say, I mean, ultimately had a ton of success both in football and track and field. I mean, all-time receiver, leading receiver in yards, touchdown receptions, yards per catch, and then certainly with some of the top 15 marks that you set in track and field, including, the school record in the 4x4. I mean, it's just interesting to hear you say that it kind of started late for you, and you didn't have all that much experience when it came to catching the ball from high school. Ultimately, when you look at those football marks and your ability to be so successful at the receiver position, what do you think helped you the most kind of get those marks going finally when you got to Lewis and Clark?
Well, I think a couple factors, Ryan. I believe that definitely the speed helps, but I did grow. Like I said, I was 5'7" when I got into high school, and I left, I was 6'3", so I did have a growth spurt. So I think the combination of just being fast and being tall definitely played a huge factor. The offense that we played was very, I would say at the time, it was very sophisticated in the sense that, a lot of times we get up to the line of scrimmage and we didn't even know what the play was. We'd usually have like a frame of what our play was going to be. And then we get up to the line, I would say at least 50-60% of the time, we would just call it at the line. And that was a little bit unusual. Like I'd never seen anything like that at the time. And it was fun because, Coach Smythe's strategy was just go where they're not. And we'd get up to the line of scrimmage, and, we'd laugh about it, at the time, it was, we'd sometimes make the comment, it's like taking candy from a baby, because we'd get up to the line of scrimmage and you just say, all right, throw me the ball, it's going to be a touchdown. It happened a lot. Again, being taller, being fast, I could get by people pretty easily. And if they could stretch it out and throw the ball, which we like to do, then it usually played in my favor.
When you think about your time with the football program at Lewis and Clark, I'm citing stats and things that stay on record boards and things of that nature, but that may not always be the best moment or the best story for an individual. When you think of your best moment with the football program, what comes to mind?
I don't know if I could say an actual moment, but I would say that, because there was just so many. We won a lot of games. Every year that I was there, we were either league champion or a runner up. And but I would say the culture of winning, it was something that, it carries with me today, in my business and just how I go about life. When you're surrounded by a winning program and the people around you, it was just such a, I don't know, it was just a confidence. It was, winning begets winning. You hear that. And we, being in the atmosphere with the guys and the teammates, of just like every week we expected to win. And also seeing how the program grew from when I was a freshman all the way through a senior. Like when we got there, uh, the program had been in place for about, I think it was 2 years, but it was slowly growing, and there were still spots in the stadium. You walk out into a game and you could still find places to sit. Um, by the end of my freshman year, I believe, sophomore, I mean, we'd walk out to the stadium and literally corner to corner was just completely packed, and there wasn't a place to sit. The track was full of people. There was just a buzz, and you could actually see things evolve up on the campus too with the students. Um, so that to me was a pretty remarkable experience to go through.
Jeff Miller joining us on lcpioneers.com live, the first of our 4-day Hall of Fame week event, as he's an inductee for the class of 2020 from Pioneers football and track and field. And track and field was, you mentioned, being speedy, helping yourself and your teammates set that 4x400 record. You had success at the NAIA district level. What was it about track and field that you enjoyed most?
Oh, track has always just been in my blood. It's something that I remember when I was 4 years old. My dad would enter me into track meets, and so it's something that I've just always just felt very natural with. Um, I thought about just focusing on football, and up at Lewis and Clark, but I think track is also a great way to stay in shape and just really focus on speed. And just being in the program. I mean, the teammates that we had, as we still have the record breaking 4x4 meter relay team, and we were really close as a group. And even our 4x1 team was really fast. And just being in that program, track, it's always going to be part of me. I'm still a huge fan of track today. I love watching the sport, and I'm glad I decided to stay with that.
So then let's discuss relationships, because you're talking about teammates that you had in both sports, and you're talking about the impact that Lewis and Clark had on you long term. How do you assess the importance of relationships that you've built going back to 1993? We're talking about, decades now that you've been removed from your time at Lewis and Clark. How have those relationships stayed with you?
Yeah, I was after I got the phone call about being inducted in the Hall of Fame. I've had a lot of time to kind of sit back and reflect, just think about those years. I can't believe it was 27 years ago, but I've had time to really look at my relationships and my and friendships that I've built, and just people that I got to meet that I've known through football. And just to give you an example, I mean, again, you don't really think about these things when you're playing football, that like, hey, someday this person might be my future business partner. Yes, that happened to me. So my quarterback that I played with, he came in my senior year, Mike Miotich. He played football at Notre Dame, and our coach Smythe tried to get him to save some credits and play one term at Lewis and Clark, which he did. And Mike and I really hit it off, not only on the football field but off the football field, and just became really good friends, and just really saw eye to eye with things. And at the time, we kind of joked around like, hey, maybe someday we could start a business together. And we went our separate ways. And then, 5 or so years later, we launched our company today, which is called EdgeLink, and it's a technical staffing and recruiting company based here in Portland. We have office here in Portland, Denver, as well as Salt Lake. And we've literally influenced and placed people, hundreds, probably thousands of people on jobs. And it's just because of that relationship we had at Lewis and Clark. It's really cultivated into such a bigger scheme of things. And another example I could share with you is Coach Joe Bushman, who's at Lewis and Clark right now. He's the godfather to my 3-year-old son. So he's someone that he and I met in high school. Actually, we were both selected into the Shrine Game, and we knew we were going to Lewis and Clark together. We hung out constantly, got to know each other. He was also a quarterback at the time, and just became really close friends. And fast forward this many years later, and we're still tightly connected. there's a lot of stories like that. And, I think that, you hear a lot about the importance of relationships, but there's definitely up at Lewis and Clark, I would say, um, we, even today, being part of the alumni program, we call it a brotherhood. There's definitely a lot of people that are part of the program that, you can go to anytime, whether they're playing ball now or 10, 15, 30, 40, 50, 60 years later. It's definitely something that, I cherish deeply.
Yeah, that relationship building goes across campus and even outside of the athletics department, no matter how strong connections are with coaches. But you discussed this opportunity for current student athletes to connect with alumni, which certainly is a value with as many of our alumni who stay in Portland. And being only 6 miles from downtown Portland, Lewis and Clark is kind of centrally located if you're all the way out west to Hillsboro, or as you mentioned, where you grew up, all the way out east in Gresham. And so I bring this question to you is you were one of the last business administration majors at Lewis and Clark, but now even full circle, 3 decades later or so, there's a Center for Entrepreneurship and Leadership at Lewis and Clark. And now there's an entrepreneurship minor. So Lewis and Clark is kind of evolving too to recognize the importance of entrepreneurship. How did you decide that business, or how did you decide that EdgeLink was going to be something that you were going to pursue? What latched you to that topic?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think that, well, the question about business. I didn't really know that was going to lead to starting my own business someday. I did know I personally had something in me maybe to start my own business someday. And so that was something that I wanted to surround myself with more. But yeah, I mean, bringing it into the real world, in terms of business and relationships. I think that's something that I've always had a particular knack for, is getting to know people. I care, I really want to get to know people. And I think that really, I didn't know I was going to get into recruiting or staffing and things of that nature. I didn't go to college to become a recruiter, or to get into staffing, but I came across it. And once I got into the business, I quickly realized, like, wow, this is, we don't sell a product or a widget. We sell a livelihood. When people take a job, that's one of the nearest, dearest things that they'll ever decide to do, buying a home or getting married or having children, things of that nature. What I want to do for my career. So I'm being at the central point of that. I found that it really kind of pulled on me, and I figured that, hey, and it kind of ties it into the staffing or into the football world, but in sports, whatever I do, I want to be the best at it. That's always something that I've learned as a life lesson through playing, not only just any kind of sports, athletics, whether it's high school, collegiate sports, the life lessons that you learn carry with you into the real world. And that's something that, I think as you look around, even in the company that we started, that's a very, very important aspect of how we go about our day.
All right. We are excited to have the class of 2020 inducted in person as soon as it is possible to do so. And I did not want to try to make any of the inductees try to replicate what I expect speeches will look like in the show. But I do have to ask you, you mentioned getting the phone call and finding out that you were inducted as an individual Hall of Famer. What does it mean for you to have the opportunity to be in there as an individual inductee?
Well, after my jaw dropped, Ryan, I picked that back up, and no, it's an honor. I mean, I think I heard you mention at the start of the show, did you say it's the oldest founding Hall of Fame? Yeah, just to be I remember walking the halls, playing sports up at LC. I remember walking the halls, and they've got the glass cabinets, and you can see people with their picture inside of there. And, people have been in there decades, 30, 40, 50, 60 years ago. And, you walk by there and you think, like, oh, someday it'd be really great to be part of that. And to get that phone call, I was blown away. So, and, like I said, it's been 27 years since I played football up there, and definitely an exciting moment. My wife was in the other room, and she heard me scream and get excited. And so it was awesome.
Well, like I said, I can't wait to have you in person as a member now of the individual side of the Hall of Fame, already a member of the team side. Jeff Miller, thanks so much for making time with for us, kicking off Hall of Fame week on lcpioneers.com live. We truly appreciate it.
Thank you so much, Ryan, and definitely a fan of your show. And let's keep it going.
Yeah,
Thank
absolutely. You're welcome. Thank you so much. That's Jeff Miller joining us on the show. Really fun stories to hear, experience that stays with you now. And I don't know, I maybe could have asked him as he talked about, it's like, wow, it's been 27 years to realize just that it sticks with people for 3 decades post graduation. That's phenomenal to me. And that's one of my favorite aspects about having teams in really any capacity, but certainly in athletics, is your team stays with you for a generation. It stays with you for decades, and that's really neat to hear how he talks about even starting a business with a former teammate, but also just how he stayed connected to the program. And being in Portland, he told me that he's able to come up to game here and there and have a chance to see the current group of Pioneers compete. And it's been really neat to see how these former student athletes have stayed in touch with the programs, and how the current coaching staffs of all of our 19 intercollegiate teams are trying to stay engaged with alumni too, and provide those connections with the current student athletes who come to Lewis and Clark, which I again think the Pioneers teams, Lewis and Clark in general, does really, really well. It's being in Portland, Oregon, and having access to everyone who stayed close to be able to either come to campus or be able to go there, and then now in the middle of the pandemic, stay connected to via Zoom, which we'll hear those stories throughout the course of this, and also tonight coming up with, as I mentioned, some of our homecoming at home events, the first of which is tonight at 5:30. If you want to know more about how you can hear from current coaches and student athletes via Zoom, be sure to check out go.lclark.edu/homecoming, and we'll have that first event coming up tonight at 5:30. The first of 5 total guests over 4 days for Hall of Fame week this week on lcpioneers.com live. Tomorrow from swimming, class of 2020 Hall of Fame inductee Lindsay Harvey. She competed as Lindsay Nixon. We'll have a chance to talk to her about how swimming impacted her experience at Lewis and Clark, how it stayed with her post Lewis and Clark, and what she's up to. And then we'll have Pablo and Judy join us. They are the Meritorious and Lifetime Achievement inductees for Lewis and Clark. We'll have a chance to talk to each of them for about 10 minutes or so, with 2 guests on our show coming up Thursday. And then Bob Harris, a track and field and cross country Hall of Fame inductee, part of the class of 2020. The only individual who's not able to join us this week is Tama Carlton from cross country and track and field. We also don't have anything specific to the 1993-94 men's basketball team, but we are planning to do something with both Tama and some of the student athletes from the men's basketball program before the end of the calendar year. And then, of course, all of our inductees, team and otherwise, to be inducted as soon as we possibly can on our campus in Portland, Oregon, sometime, hopefully as soon as this spring. We will keep everyone updated as far as the pandemic and such at lcpioneers.com/COVID. So if you are looking for updates, that is the best place to go, as we have a landing page that outlines things from the NCAA, the Northwest Conference, as well as Lewis and Clark College. So big thanks to you for watching. Big thanks to Jeff Miller for joining us. He was so great sending us, pictures and giving me some thoughts on what he remembers most about his time at Lewis and Clark, as have all of our Hall of Famers this week. And we're looking forward to having more tomorrow on lcpioneers.com live, Tuesday through Friday, 11:30 a.m. Pacific time on Facebook Live. And if you miss any of the show or any of our past shows, you can find them at youtube.com/lcpios. Until we talk to you again tomorrow, thanks for having fun with us. I'm Ryan Goff. Goodbye, everybody.
My favorite spot on campus is right outside the Dovecote, little benches, and there's flowers growing there, and you can get a little coffee at the Dovecote and sit there.
My favorite spot on campus is definitely the weight room. I get that everybody loves the gardens or the manor house, but our facilities for athletics here are actually amazing too, and the weight room is definitely my favorite spot.
My favorite spot on campus would either be the glade outside of the athletic facilities or South Campus.
What is my favorite spot on campus? I really like the back porch of the manor house. It looks out on Mount Hood, and on a clear day, it's super beautiful just to sit around with friends.
Hi, I'm Nick Lombardi. Something I've learned at Winterim this year is how to communicate a vision.
My biggest takeaway from Winterim is probably the networking. getting to talk to everybody, connect with people for the future is one of the most valuable things, and I did winterim last year, came back for more this year.
I think a way in which my liberal arts education has really helped me and my group formulate our ideas is that concept of critical thinking and having many different backgrounds. Me being an econ major and my two group mates being chemistry majors, we really get that well-rounded background, well-rounded ideas.
I think overall it's absolutely worth doing. You find yourself not only being more prepared for, say, well, this next semester, on top of being more prepared for life in general.